distract from the bad media attention that happened last week with the also unprecedented public arguing between President Trump and the richest person in the world, Elon Musk.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of this protest, they seem intense and emotional. Some people worry they might escalate into something much bigger. Could this demonstration grow into major nationwide unrest? And what triggered them in the first place?
Well, again, the major reason that people are protesting is that people are being arrested who aren't criminals, people who are friends of members of the community, active participants in daily life. And you'll find newspaper stories and news stories across the country of regular citizens working in restaurants, working in schools, people who are contributing members of society, taxpayers, and they are being rounded up. Most troubling is the tactic used by ICE agents, immigration agents, to wait outside of courtrooms when people who are coming to courtrooms for a regularly scheduled asylum hearing, and the government lawyer at that hearing decides to step away from their pre-agreed upon arrangement with the asylum seekers and say that they are going to seek immediate deportation. And the agents are there to arrest people right away. These are longstanding members of society. And that's the reason why people are angry. When you talk about Los Angeles specifically or California, you're talking about a state and a city that has a large minority population that is primarily centered in immigrants from South America, Central America, and Mexico. One could say they're immigrants. Some could say that these people existed in California longer than when California was a part of America. So it's always had an intrinsic part of Latino and Hispanic culture, and those people are being targeted specifically by federal agents, and that's a problem for the local authorities. These are authorities who've been always seeking to recruit those people, those members of those communities, into their police force. We know that this year, with this immigration roundups, that's going to be a problem for the city to find enough recruits for their police force. But in general, the majority of the population is going to be against having armed federal agents enter schools, enter libraries, enter churches even, and rounding up immigrants.
Mm-hmm. You know, watching from the outside, the country looks deeply divided. Trump rhetoric has become more aggressive, even mentioned the army and issuing open threats. Or is that an exaggeration?
For me, this reminds me of the coup in Turkey, the attempted coup in Turkey. And here in the United States, all that the news people were showing was the airport in Istanbul. And that was the extent of their coverage of this massive coup. Nothing in Anatolia at all. Nothing across the entire countryside. We saw nothing. We saw one part of the city. And here, in the same way, we are looking at television footage of one city block in Los Angeles. Sometimes those protesters spill out over onto the freeway, but usually within an hour, that freeway is up and running. So it's very, if you know the area, you are familiar with the fact that the city is very busy. The city has many things happening. There are parades and other actions happening throughout the city. The city is not on fire. There's one area of the city, inside one neighborhood, that is particularly being targeted with protest because that is a holding facility for those federal agents who are arresting immigrants. So if you look beyond that, it's an entirely different view. Again, many major cities have peaceful protests. The vast majority of these protests are peaceful. However, when you send in the National Guard, these are military personnel. They have no right to take part in police action. If the governor were to invoke the National Guard, he could ask the National Guard to arrest people and help the police. But since the president took over the National Guard and sent them in over the objection of the governor, they really have no power to do anything but intimidate with their weaponry and to protect federal buildings. That is the only thing they are allowed to do. We are, of course, worried that the President Trump might turn to his previous thoughts when there was protests outside the White House in his first administration, and he was asking members of the military to shoot against American citizens who were protesting. This time, we don't have the same kind of leadership of the military. In fact, the Secretary of Defense is an enormous fan of President Trump and would do practically anything to please him. So that worries people as well. Perhaps President Trump is contemplating some kind of military action against American citizens, which would be a first in American history.
While the US is focused on its own problem, it feels like Ukraine is being forgotten. Trump is now sending weapons to the Middle East and says Ukraine and Russia should keep fighting for a bit longer. So, is Trump still on Ukraine's side, or is he walking away?
I think there's two things here. One, I wouldn't say Ukraine is forgotten, and I'll go into that. But as far as President Trump, we've seen this from the very beginning of this administration. From when he was elected, he was saying very different things from one week to the next. Especially when you take into account what he says on social media, which usually is more critical of Ukraine, and then in his public statements, sometimes those more moderate what he says about Ukraine. We saw the vast difference between what happened in the White House in February to his conversation at the Vatican with President Zelensky. So I really hope that there is a face-to-face meeting at the G7 and at the NATO summit this month. I think that can go a long way to reestablishing better communications between the two countries. And of course, we know that the minerals deal that was signed allows for even better communication with our country through the economic front. As far as Ukraine being lost in this, I would say that I'm surprised how much Ukraine has remained in the lead story for Ukrainian American newspapers, American news channels, as well as the online discourse. We all remember the day that Operation Spiderweb was revealed to the world. That was the same day that later on there was a terrorist attack in the United States in Colorado. It has defied expectation that terrorist act has received less and less coverage over the next week, and yet Ukraine has remained as a topic on the news channels on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So the attention hasn't flagged. And that's another reason why activists have taken to more and more conversations with their elected officials. This week, between the days of 10th, 11th, and 12th, there will be many activists in Washington, D.C. from across the United States, specifically focused on not just the sanctions bill, but other legislation that could be enacted to help Ukraine. And that's happening specifically because the attention on Ukraine is still holding up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. Today there was some rare good news, prisoner exchange. This is an encouraging sign of diplomacy, but obviously it's not the end of the war. Would you say this is a part of a genuine peace process, or just another chapter in a lone war?
I think we've seen these from the beginning of the war in 2014. So yes, it is another chapter. I don't see that any discussions will move forward so long as Russia is really not interested in these discussions. We're not having discussions at the minister level. We're not having discussions at the state-to-state level, and that is very much on because of the actions of Russia. Ukraine has demonstrated time and again that President Zelensky is ready to meet and speak on behalf of Ukraine to find a permanent ceasefire, but Russia is not interested in that. And the kind of quote-unquote diplomats that they send to Istanbul or other places are not people who are interested in seeking peace. They look to insult Ukraine. They look at intimidating Ukraine. And I really thank the Ukrainian diplomatic corps, including all the ministers who have strived to meet with the enemy, no matter if they're not interested in peace, just for the sake of having these people return, and that is progress. Mm-hmm.
We know new negotiations are expected after June 20. There's a lot of speculation around them. What do you expect from these upcoming talks and real breakthroughs on the horizon?
I think if Russia keeps this at the same level that it is, people like Medinsky, people